Welcome to Civic Pulse, where we explore why it matters, who's in charge, and how we have the ability to make a difference by voting and remaining engaged. Thank you for joining us. Today I'm excited to have with us on the program Yehoshua Jason Bedrick. Yehoshua is a former New Hampshire state legislator. He is also a proud Chasidic Jew and one of the country's leading experts on school choice, and he currently works for the Heritage Foundation in Washington, D.C. Yehoshua, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, before we get into the topic of today's discussion, which is exciting new legislation before the Congress, which could directly impact scholarships for yeshiva education and private schools, I want to talk to you about your time in the New Hampshire State House of Representatives. So I understand, if you've been following Crown Heights on the local website, I don't know if you have, you would have seen that Crown Heights had a tremendous increase in voter turnout and registration in the last 5 years. And as a Jewish Future Alliance, one of the organizations I founded, one of the challenges we face when we're trying to do outreach and tell people to go out and vote, we always hear our vote doesn't matter. It's not going to make a difference. Now, when you ran for office, I understand you won by 1 vote. You won by 6 votes and lost by 1 vote. Is that true?
That's right.
Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So I originally ran for the state legislature because of the school choice issue. When I was in college, Babson College, I was doing a paper on, it had to be about some policy in a particular place. So I chose my home state of New Hampshire and education, and I learned about school choice from Milton Friedman and decided, I'm going to write a paper on this. Now, there was a bill going through the legislature at the time that failed by a vote of 171 to 172, 1 vote in the state legislature. And after class, I was complaining about this to my professor, and he said, well, what are you going to do about it? And, and I was a college student. I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to my dorm and drink beer and play video games. What am I going to do? But this was sort of, Lubavitchers would understand my Ayeka moment, right? This is that question, what are you going to do about it, was ringing in my ears. And I thought to myself, if I were in the state legislature, I would have voted the other way. If I had replaced a no vote with a yes vote, it would have won. So I ran as an independent at age 21 and lost resoundingly. I came in last place, but I did better than people thought. So 2 years later, when I'm sitting in yeshiva, I get a phone call from a sitting state rep who asked me to run. Long story, but I'll give you the short version. I was 23, a relative unknown, full beard, Shomer Shamus, Shomer Kashrus, Shomer Nagia, etc., and managed to win by 5 votes. There was a recount, and after the recount, I won by 6 votes. So your vote really does make a difference. I wasn't sure after 2 years in the legislature if I was going to run again, and decided that I would give it to Hashem. So I spent the summer in yeshiva instead of campaigning, and came back right at the end and lost my primary by 1 vote, which was fortuitous because I would have been in the minority party anyway, and my school choice bill still would have failed. But it did mean that I met my wife, so it was a big win for me, and I got to go back to yeshiva. And then 2 years after that, my friends took back the legislature, and we were able to pass a school choice bill.
I have to ask this, did you vote for yourself?
I did.
So
I'm not sure if my mom did. That could have made the difference. Your mom could have
lost the election.
That could have made the difference.
Wow. So what a powerful story. What a powerful example how every vote makes a difference and every vote counts. When you were in the New Hampshire State House of Representatives, did you ever experience anti-Semitism?
Not directly. Nobody said anything anti-Semitic to my face. Now, there were a few people who told me that there were others who were making, and they wouldn't say who, comments behind my back. I also got some anti-Semitic hate mail, but most of that was coming from out of states. So not so much.
What happens if you missed a vote because of Yom Tov or Shabbos because of the holidays?
I never missed a vote because of Shabbos. They didn't have votes on Shabbos. They only held votes during the week. The only time I missed votes for that reason was because of Pesach, and it was not an originally scheduled session. And actually, the speaker came to apologize to say that it was going to be on Yontif because originally they were not going to schedule it then, but there was a what's called the crossover deadline, by which time all bills that started in the House must go to the Senate. All bills that are in the Senate must go to the House. So you have to finish by that date. And they hadn't, so they added a day on the calendar, and I had to miss all the votes that were on that day.
As a former elected official, if somebody has a choice, an elected official has a choice between their personal religious beliefs and what they think the constituency needs or wants, like an Orthodox Jew or a Catholic or is a member of let's say, New York State Assembly, New York State Senate, or in your case, the New Hampshire State House of Representatives, and you have a choice where you have your personal religious beliefs would want you to vote one way, and you feel maybe the needs of your constituents or the will would push you the other way. Mm-hmm. What do you do?
You vote with your conscience. There's a few different theories of political representation in a representative democracy. And one is that just the representative is representing the will of the people on all matters, the majority of the voters on all matters. And essentially, it should be like a direct democracy, but practically we can't have everybody voting everything, and so we're just going to send this one person to do it. But you might know the will of the people on some hot topic issues, right, where they're doing a lot of polling or whatever, but you're, as a legislator, on any given day, you might be voting on hundreds of bills. It is impossible for people to know to know what the majority of voters think on all of those things.
Just know who screams louder,
right? So there's another theory that I subscribe to by Edmund Burke, the great political philosopher and statesman who himself served in the legislature in Britain, who says, look, you're being elected for your judgment. You're going to tell the voters where you stand on some of the major issues, and you're going to get majority support from your district, but they're not electing you to just, be an agent of the majority. They're saying, we trust your judgment. We're sending you, we've looked at you, we've looked at your character, we've looked at where you stand on the issues, and we think that you're the person that should be representing us because of your judgment. And so the legislator really, I think, does have to vote their conscience.
Thank you. So I understand there's a bill before the Congress now. It's going to have tremendous impact on scholarships for yeshiva education and for private schools. Can you tell, I know you can't talk about the bill itself because it's going through the various versions and you're not going to talk support or against the bill, but can you tell us a little bit about school choice and what exactly is happening with this bill?
Sure. So school choice is the idea that the money should follow the child, whether that's state money. In this case, they're talking about federal money. Usually the school choice bills are at the state level, that the money should follow the child to the learning environment that families choose. And so they take many different forms. The most common form that people know of is what's called the school voucher. School voucher is just like a coupon, right? So let's say the state is kicking in $8,000 per pupil. Instead of that going to the local public school, you would essentially get a coupon. You take that to your local private school, your yeshiva, and you give it to them, and they get $8,000. That's a voucher. What they're thinking about doing at the federal level is what's called a tax credit scholarship program. It's similar, but it's already in 22 different states around the country, including Florida. A lot of yeshivas are getting money in Florida, in Arizona, in Georgia, using tax credit scholarship funds. What this does is says, if you are an individual or a corporate taxpayer, and you have a tax liability, you can make a donation to a nonprofit scholarship granting organization, and you can get a credit for that. It varies state by state. In Florida and Arizona and several others, it's a dollar for dollar credit. What they were talking about at the federal level is also a dollar for dollar credit. So again, not a deduction, but a credit. So you're not reducing you're not just deducting this from your tax liability, you're actually getting a credit on it. So if you owe, let's say, $2,000 and to the federal government, and you make a donation to a scholarship organization of $2,000, your tax liability goes down to zero.
As opposed to if you make a donation to a nonprofit, you'll save 30, 35%, whatever.
Depending on your tax bracket.
Your income is lower, exactly.
Right, exactly. So this is a credit. Now, those scholarship organizations then give the money to eligible children. Now, one version of the federal bill said any child who is eligible for a public school, K through 12, is eligible if they come from a family earning up to 300% of the federal poverty line.
Which is about what?
I think that's maybe $80,000 for a family of 4, but if you've got more children, the number's going to go up. So if you've got a family of 8, it could be north of $100,000. But the federal version that is being talked about right now would probably be universal. There are already several states that have some form. There are 11, almost 12 states that have universal school choice, meaning that every child in the state is eligible for their school choice policy.
No matter how much
no matter how much income you have, as long as you're eligible for the public school, you're eligible for the school choice program.
Right. So the current state programs that exist would be on state taxes.
Yeah, all the state programs are on the state. Like every school, every public school is funded from state, local, and federal sources. The state school choice programs tap into the state portion. So all the local money stays with the public schools, all the federal money stays with the public schools. It's the state money that follows the child to the school of their choice. Now what's being talked about in Congress would be a federal bill where you would be getting federal funding to go to private school.
Right. So just for the purposes of clarity, if somebody, let's say, has a company that's making $1 million a year and their federal tax liability is what? 10%? I don't know.
Maybe it depends on a lot of factors, but make it easy, let's say 10%.
Let's say it's a $100,000 tax liability, right? If they give that $100,000 to a scholarship program, they're at zero now.
That's right. Now, I believe the last version of the bill capped the percentage of their liability. So let's say they chose a 50% cap. So in that case, they could give up to $50,000 to a scholarship organization and get a credit. And then the other $50,000 they'd anyway be paying to the state. So they're still, they owe $100,000. They're still giving $100,000, but now half's going to the government, half is going to scholarship organizations that are helping yeshivas.
Which it may not hurt the local public schools because it's a separate source of funding. It's not like vouchers, which is coming from the actual, in many cases, school funding that would go to other sources, correct?
Yeah, so I would argue that even in those states where they have a state school choice program, when the child leaves the school, there are fixed and variable costs. Now, the opponents of school choice want to say it's all fixed costs. If that kid leaves and the money leaves with them, the school still has the same electric bill and so on and so forth. But that's not actually true. There are a lot of fixed costs, but there are also a lot of variable costs. And typically, the state funding is actually less than those variable costs. So more costs are walking out the door than revenue. But in the case of New York does not fund their public schools on enrollment. That's unusual. Most states, a large component of public school funding is enrollment. In New York, it's not. So when kids leave public schools in New York, costs walk out the door, but all the revenue stays. And in this case, to your point, it's not even state revenue, it's the federal revenue. So it really wouldn't affect the New York public schools at all.
Well, I think the argument against school choice would be that, that's true for students that are currently in public school that would leave. What about the tens of thousands of yeshiva students that are not in public school? Where's that money going to come from on a state level? I think that's why the local unions probably oppose it.
The unions are not fiscal hawks. They're more concerned about the switchers. They're more concerned about what they call the public school exodus, which I mean, again, think about what they're saying. They're saying, well, if families had a choice, a lot of them would leave. What is that saying about the quality of the service that they're providing? But they're less concerned about the kids who are already in private school. Now, they're going to still raise that as an argument. It's heads I win, tails you lose. If we see a whole bunch of kids leave, they say, the kids are leaving the public school, we're losing money, this is terrible. If the state is mostly subsidizing kids that were already in private school, they're going to say, look, it's not even benefiting people who, these people were paying out of pocket, now the state's picking up the tab. So they're going to argue against it either way. And I think we should just ignore them and make the case for school choice. The promise of public education is that every single child has access to a quality education. And the reality is that although the public schools try, and they try hard, a lot of them do, to fulfill that promise, they can't actually do it. You would be much better off if families could choose the school that works best for their kids and have the money follow the child.
So right now, the bill's in front of the Congress, and so I understand step one. Somebody makes a donation to this special nonprofit that gives scholarships. Now, how do the recipients of those scholarships, what happens next for them? Does that work?
So then families would apply to the scholarship organizations. And the bill is not yet in front of Congress. There were a few different versions of the bill last year that was called the Education Choice for Children Act. Right now, what we're hearing is that it's going to be included in the budget reconciliation bill. Now, without getting too deep into the weeds of how this works, this is important. If it were a standalone bill, it would fail because not to get too political, the Republicans tend to support school choice. Democrats tend to oppose school choice. And the Democrats would be able to filibuster the bill in the Senate and it would not pass. But the budget vote and the budget reconciliation vote are a simple majority vote. You do not require, there's no ability to filibuster the budget or the reconciliation. So the Congress has to pass a budget, and they're going to do it at some point this year. The only question is what's in that budget and what's in the reconciliation bill that goes along with it. So we don't know all the details yet. That's the kind of thing that's being hammered out behind the scenes right now. But I can tell you what goes on at the state level. In the states, you're going to have a number of different scholarship organizations, and some of them are going to be for all students. So there's a group in Florida called Step Up for Students. They fund all children in the state going to any different type of school. In Arizona, you've got a bunch of different scholarship organizations, some that are like the Step Up model, but then you've got the Jewish tuition organization, for example, that funds a whole bunch of different types of Jewish schools, some of them Orthodox, some of them non-Orthodox. You have the Chabad tuition organization. You've got there's the Catholic school grant fund. There's a whole bunch of different organizations that are funding different types of schools, some Montessori schools, what have you. So a family that's going to a particular school will talk to the administration, and they'll say, the administration will tell them, here are the 3 or 5 scholarship organizations that we work with. And then you're going to go to one of those scholarship organizations and you're going to apply to get funding to support your child.
So, for example, if Crown Heights has a scholarship organization that local community donors, or Borough Park or Williamsburg, whatever it is, local donors give that scholarship organization, and then members of that community could apply to that scholarship organization, and the money will go for tuition or other educational needs. And somebody who would typically give the school maybe $10,000, it's likely he'll give the scholarship organization $50,000. He's getting dollar for dollar tax credit, which means he's losing nothing by giving that money.
That's right. Whereas before, he was making a $10,000 donation and getting a savings because there's a deduction. Right. Now he's getting a credit, so he could have the same out-of-pocket cost with a much higher level of donation.
So this is going before Congress soon, and we're going to get into that. But those that oppose it, the opponents, is the issue only school choice? Or is it a general budget that the money's coming from somewhere? There's going to be less taxes being paid. What is the root of the opposition?
I mean, I think the main opposition you're going to see on this is school choice related, and people have a variety of different arguments why they oppose school choice. Some more practical, some more ideological. But yes, just generally speaking, everybody is fighting over the budget. And so some people are saying, you shouldn't be spending $5 billion here. You could be spending $5 billion over there. So those sorts of arguments are also going to be happening behind the scenes. And you're going to have some of the key policymakers in the House, in the Senate, and in the White House sitting down together and sort of hammering these things out.
So now what happens next? Well, what's the process?
Right now, it's all those sort of the behind-the-scenes jockeying and the horse trading, and that at a certain point, they're going to get to a bill that they think they could get a majority vote in both House and Senate. And at that point, there is one big fight going on behind the scenes right now over the policy design of this program that would have major ramifications for folks living in New York, for example. And that is who is going to get access to these dollars. So we'll call it Model A and Model B. Model A says this is a federal program that is going to be for all citizens in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. So it doesn't matter where you live. You're going to have scholarship organizations in your state. Taxpayers in your state can donate to them and get federal credit, and so on and so forth. There is another model, call it Model B. The second model says, you know what? We want to use the federal tax code as an incentive for states to adopt school choice policies. There's about 30 states that have, actually more than 30 states that have school choice policies of some form. There's 11, almost 12 states that have universal school choice. And the argument I'm hearing is we want to create an incentive to adopt universal school choice policies at the state level. So we are only going to give these funds to states that already have universal school choice, right? So we're going to take tax dollars from all 50 states and only allow folks in the states with universal school choice to tap into them. So now if they're getting an $8,000 scholarship at the state level, and now they're getting $5,000 of federal tax money, and I'm just sort of making up numbers here, they can use both of those. And that's going to create an incentive for other states to say, hey, we want our citizens to tap into those dollars too. We're going to pass a state level school choice program. And look, there's also a political thing going on here. Every single state that has universal school choice right now is a red state, where Republicans are usually in most of those states have a trifecta in both the House, Senate, and governor's mansion. So there's going to be a temptation for them to go in that direction. If they do, that means that folks in New York, and for that matter, New Jersey, California, et cetera, are not going to get access to the scholarship tax credit program.
Right, but New York residents, right, when they pay a federal tax, it goes into the general fund, right? Mm-hmm. If some of that money goes towards a scholarship organization locally, right, so they're keeping some of that money locally. Again, going to private schools, whatever it is, going to Yeshivas. But if they keep it in the general fund and it doesn't go local, I mean, New York's excluded, it's not like it's going to translate into more funding for New York elsewhere, right? It's going to go to the general national budget, right? So what would be the reason that local representatives that may oppose the bill would oppose the version of the bill that would include, because tell me if I'm wrong, I understand the process like this. You have a bill, mm-hmm. and the bill now would be inclusive of all states, right? Somebody comes forward and makes an amendment and says, no, we'll only give it to the states that have school choice already, or that create school choice.
Or the reverse.
Or the reverse, that the bill is not inclusive of all states, only it's limited to states that have school choice, and somebody makes an amendment that it should include states that don't have school choice, right?
Right.
So what would be the argument against that? Why would, our representative is Yvette Clark. Mm-hmm. I know that she's very close to local public schools, and we're not talking about public school money, because in New York, for example, they don't get funding based on attendance, right? They get the same amount of funding, right? So why would she vote against a bill or an amendment to a bill that would only, or I guess against her or for, depending what the amendment is, that would only bring funds into the neighborhood? What would be the reason for somebody like a Democrat, a local Democrat, to vote against or for such a bill?
So I'd say this. The budget bill is very often a party line vote. Now, there's some defections on both sides sometimes, but it's usually pretty close to a party line vote. It's the big bill, right? And unless the Republicans and Democrats are able to reach some sort of, negotiate and get something that everyone's happy with, then usually it's a party line vote. But even if somebody is going to vote for or against the bill, that doesn't mean they're going to vote for or against every single amendment, right? So you can have somebody who says, I know at the end of the day, I'm not going to like this. I don't like where they're putting their money. I don't like anything. Maybe there's 5 things in this budget I like, and there's 100 things I don't like. I'm voting no. But there's also going to be dozens of amendments that are going to be proposed on the bill. And they could be on either side of that amendment. And so I could see a situation where there's a Democratic legislator in New York, New Jersey, California, et cetera, who says, I'm going to vote against this bill. But right now it's designed in that Model B type, right? It's the model where the money is coming from my constituents and it's only going to red states. I'm going to vote for an amendment to make it Model A. I'm going to vote for an amendment that makes all that money go to all 50 states. So now my constituents are going to benefit. Even if I'm going to vote against the final version of the bill, if the bill is going to pass anyway, I would at least like it to have this amendment so that it benefits my constituents. So I can foresee a situation, because folks might be listening to this podcast living in a blue state and saying, well, there's nothing I can do. I'm represented by a Democrat who's not going to vote for the final version of the Republican draft of the budget, but they might vote for amendments to the budget.
So let's simplify this, right? Let's talk about this bill in particular. There's a bill, let's say, comes before Congress that it's inclusive of, it's part of the broader bill, the general bill, and it says there that all states should have this scholarship program where you could donate and get a tax credit, and that money could then be given as scholarships to local private schools or Yeshivas, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody comes forward and makes an amendment and says, no, we're only giving it to states that already have school choice.
A state-level school choice
program. Now, that goes up for a vote.
Right.
And the Congress and the Senate, and the Congress and the Senate vote, right? It happens in Congress, it happens in both houses.
Both houses are going to have an opportunity to vote on the budget and amend it, and then they'll usually have what's called...
It can be amended in either place, right?
Right. So if they pass 2 different versions, then they'll have what's called a committee of conference that hammers out some compromise between the 2 chambers, and then it has to go back to each chamber
for a vote. So there's an amendment
made.
And
at that point, there's no amendments anymore. It's an up or down vote.
Right. So there's an amendment made to include all states, or to oppose all states, depending on the version of the bill. Mm-hmm. What you're saying is that even somebody, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, that would oppose the final bill or support the final bill could take a different position regarding each amendment proposed.
That's right.
So I would think that the real opposition, like let's say in a state like New York, would be whether or not this federal tax credit, which would translate into scholarships, would that encourage a mass exodus from the local public schools, right? Which I would think not, because it doesn't happen overnight. You have to go to the private school, you have to apply for the scholarship, and you have to be accepted. You have to fit the qualifications, and you also have to be in a certain income level, potentially, depending on what passes, right? So we're talking about potentially a very small risk.
Of a mass exodus? Yeah, there tends not to be a mass exodus overnight. We've passed universal school choice bills in a whole bunch of states. But, over time, families do leave, and already public school enrollment is declining. But frankly, they've got to get
they have to make better schools. That would encourage them to make
that, or they've got to consolidate. They have to adjust. We're in the midst of a baby bust, right? There was the baby boom with the boomers, and the boomers are retiring, the subsequent generations had fewer kids, and so with the exception of a few states that are just growing because of immigration and state-to-state migration. Most states, even states that, have no net or a small number of in-migration, have declining numbers in their schools. And the schools are going to have to learn how to adjust. They're going to have to consolidate. They're going to have to figure out a way, just like everybody else has to live within their budget. The schools have to live within their budget. And school choice is, some people are going to leave because of school choice. That's a reality. But are the kids funding units for the schools, or are the schools designed for the kids? This is the fundamental question. And too many people treat the kids like just funding units for the schools. The school system is supposed to be designed to help the kids. What we really should be pushing for is a system that helps every kid achieve his or her God-given potential. And the best way to do that is to empower those people who love their kids most and know them best, which is their parents, to make decisions about what learning environment they should be in and have the money follow the child.
That's a great point. So the Republican parties, President Trump, he's probably really deciding policy for the Republican Party. And is there any indication whether he supports this bill in a more broad version that would include all states, or he would be more inclined to limit it to states that are, let's be politically incorrect and say limit it to Republican states, because for practical purposes, they can't limit it only to Republican states, correct? That would be illegal. They could limit it to states that.
So you can't write a bill that says this money is only going to go to states with a majority Republican legislature or something like that. That would be unconstitutional. But you can design a bill to say, remember years ago there was the Cornhusker Compromise, where they designed a bill and they said this money is going to go to any state that meets the following criteria. And when you look at the criteria, it only applied to the state of Nebraska, and the senator from Nebraska was the swing vote on this bill, right? So surprise, surprise, that's how that played out.
My wife's from Nebraska, but
okay, so we've seen this sort of thing play out over and over again. So here, though, they're not even saying Republican. If you're being cynical, and there's reason to be cynical in politics, then they're saying, yeah, let's design the bill to only go to states that have universal school choice. Oh, and by the way, all those states happen to be Republican trifecta, very deep red states. On the other hand, they are, charitably, they are trying to pass school choice in all 50 states. And they see this as an incentive to do that. But it just means that people that are in blue states are going to have to wait.
Like a party agenda, basically.
Yes. So I think that is the reason they're trying. I think a lot of the advocates that are pushing for that really do honestly want it to get to all 50 states at the state level and see that as the best way to do that. There's also the concern that, you don't want the federal government deciding what a good school choice bill looks like at the state level, because that's going to distort how states start passing bills. But you asked about President Trump's support. President Trump has made very clear for a long time that he's all in on school choice. He's made very clear in the in his campaign, in the National Republican Party platform, they want to pass a school choice bill, and this is going to be a top priority for them. That being said, the president has not taken a very clear position on a lot of the details. And so whether it looks like that Model A or Model B that I discussed, the president has not said whether he was going to go in one or the other direction. And so that's why you're seeing all this jockeying and lobbying behind the scenes.
So for practical purposes, we live in New York now. One model would allow New York to tap into this fund and scholarship fund, and one model wouldn't.
That's right.
And are we going to see Republicans that would vote yes on the bill but no on the amendment, and Democrats vote yes on the amendment and no on the bill? Are we going to see that?
Possibly. It depends how the bill comes out and whether there's enough support to get an amendment or not. And I can conceive of a situation where it comes out as a bill that's only for certain states and not for all states, that then gets amended to being for all states. That's, and some people that voted no on the amendment vote yes on the final bill, and some of those that voted yes on the amendment vote no on the final bill. That is certainly a possible outcome. It's also possible that in all the behind the scenes jockeying, look, it's not just the Jewish community that would want it to be in all 50 states. The Catholics want it to be in all 50 states. Folks involved in the Montessori school system and others are going to be pushing for all 50 states. And they are also going to have influential members that are in the states that would benefit either way. But the organizations representing them in D.C. are likely to be on the side of it being all 50 states. So just because you're a congressman in one of those states that's going to benefit either way doesn't mean you wouldn't want it to be all 50 states. So we will see. We don't have that much information of where all the members of Congress stand on this issue yet. But I will say I've been involved in the school choice movement for 20 years. It has never, even during President Trump's first term, never been a real live issue at the federal level. Now, I know there are those who were pushing for it at the federal level last time President Trump was in office, but it was always a standalone bill that was going to be vetoed. That was going to be filibustered anyway. It never stood a chance. They were never putting it into the budget. And as a matter of fact, they never even, the administration, even with Betsy DeVos as Secretary of Education, who used to run the American Federation for Children, one of the top school choice organizations in the country, never pushed it really until they lost control of the House of Representatives in the midterms. And then it became a symbolic campaign issue, but it was not going to pass. This time, something is going to pass. I am very confident something is going to pass. It's going to be
20 states are good, that's for sure.
The question is, what is that bill going to look like?
So 20 states.
Well, if they pass it for only universal school choice states, we're talking about 11 states. By the end of the year, I think we'll actually have closer to 18 states, which is tremendous. By the way, 2020, 0 states had universal publicly funded school choice. And right now we've got 11, almost 12. By the end of the year, we could have 18. That's tremendous progress. Those states are going to be, I think, they're going to have access to federal funds either way. The only question is, what about all the other states?
Well, they're not the states that need it the most, because in a state like Florida, you have states tax credits, you have vouchers. In a state of New York, like New York, you have nothing. So we're a state that needs it probably the most, and the tuition is just out of control. It's incredibly expensive, and people can't afford it. People aren't having kids because tuition is so expensive. But I think this is a perfect example how being engaged matters and how voting matters, because this is a bill that could directly impact scholarships and the cost of your yeshiva education, of one's yeshiva education. And your elected official may not vote down party line for the amendments. And typically, and you were an elected official, and maybe you could correct me or clarify this, local congressional, more Congress than Senate, because Senate represents the full state, but somebody in Congress, they're going to look at what their constituents want, how it's going to affect their constituency. What's the voting history in the constituency? And they're going to vote largely based on the need, because they want to get reelected. So if there's a elected official, a congressman or a congresswoman that have a large segment of their constituency that go to private school, whether it's Catholic schools, it's Yeshivas, they're more likely to vote for this amendment that would include a state like New York, even if they would oppose the final bill and vote down party line.
That's right, but only if they're hearing from their constituents, because the anti-school choice lobby, right? It's not just the teachers' unions too, by the way. It's the superintendents, it's the administrators association. It's a whole host of organizations that are either directly working in the public school system or that provide services to that system and benefit from it and don't want people leaving that system. Anybody who has an investment in the status quo, they've got a lobbyist at their state capitol, and they've got a lobbyist, or multiple lobbyists often, in Washington, D.C. And believe me, your local member of Congress is going to be hearing from them. The only way that member of Congress might vote in the interest of their constituents is if they hear from their constituents. Otherwise, you don't exist. The only people who exist in the minds of legislators are the people who are speaking to them. And so if you're not crying out and say, we need this for our children, then they're not going to be listening to you.
So I would say there's 2 levels. The people who exist are those who vote, and after they vote, they continue to stay engaged and speak out. Because if you don't vote, they could see, you could, especially a neighborhood like Borough Park, Williamsburg, where the Jewish community is in one area. Crown Heights is a little more diverse and spread out, but even Crown Heights, there's certain electoral districts which they know are largely Hasidic Jews or Orthodox Jews, and they could look, what's the voting turnouts? And they take that into account when they make decisions and they vote.
That's right.
I have one more question for you before we close the program. Is there, I know the federal bill is still in discussion, but on a state level, maybe it could give you an idea. Can somebody who donates to this nonprofit organization that gives scholarships, are they also eligible for, or would they be disqualified from receiving funding if they make a donation to the program? Are there conflict clauses? I understand. This is what I get. I know that I could go tomorrow. I'll give $100,000 to this program, and I could say this money should go to this and this yeshiva. But I can't tell them what students it should go to.
That's right.
And the yeshiva, then the scholarship organization, they decide based on their own criteria which students. Maybe they'll give it to the more low income first, even the higher income.
That's right.
They'll make a decision, right, based on that. But what happens if that person who makes a donation qualifies to receive a scholarship? Are there any protections in place to ensure that there's going to be no, I guess, trading going
That's
on?
a great point. So we don't know how the bill is going to be written in Congress, but I can speak to the tax credit scholarship programs that are already in 22 different states. They vary. Some don't. Some say you just have to give it to a scholarship organization. That's it. Most of them, though, you're allowed to earmark to schools or school types. So let's say there were, a Catholic man who says, look, comes to the scholarship organization. He says, look, I know you support all different types of schools, but I specifically want this to go to a Catholic school. Okay. Any Catholic school is fine. Or you could have somebody that says, I went to this particular Montessori school. I'm an alumnus of this school. I want the money to go to a student at that school. They are allowed to, if the scholarship organization allows it, the law allows them to earmark for a particular school or a particular school sector. What you can't do is earmark to a particular child. You can't say, I want, Joe Schmo to get the scholarship fund.
The donor can't.
The donor cannot do that. The donor cannot do that. Now, from the beneficiary side, it does not matter legally whether you contributed or not, right? Some people are not going to have, they're going to be very low income. They're not going to have a tax liability. So they can't get a tax credit from donating because there's nothing to credit it against. That does not disqualify them from participating. On the flip side, if they did make a donation to the scholarship organization because they do have a tax credit and they're still eligible, that's fine. As long as they're eligible, they can participate.
As long as the scholarship
program
program makes a decision.
Yes. So the scholarship organization is going to have whatever criteria they have for how they're going to be allocating these funds. Usually they're allocated based on need, but different groups have different formulas for that. Some that may take into consideration special needs and all sorts of things, or, particular family situation. Two families that have the same number of kids and the same income might still look different to the scholarship organization. One family, you'll often, when you go through this process, you will talk about extenuating circumstances. So yes, we had this income last year, but my husband lost his job. Or a close member of the family, Chas v'shalom, was really sick and hospitalized, and we had all these extra expenses, or there was a fire, or whatever it is that happened. So scholarship organizations can sometimes take that into effect within the rules that the government has established. So if the government says 300% of federal poverty line is the cutoff, that's the cutoff. But within those eligible families, or if they make it universal within all the families that are applying, they can take need into account in a variety of different ways.
And I would say that when you say staying engaged and hearing from the community, it doesn't just have to be your congressperson. You have a state senator, you have an assembly member, you have a council member, and you may not have the congresspersons there, but they do. And if they hear about the incredible need, and they voice their concern, then the community's concerns will be brought before the elected officials and make these decisions.
That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us on Civic Pulse. This episode is going to air on Spotify, YouTube, X, Twitter, and on community websites. See you all live.